All right, so this is a special moment in time because when I was starting out in the business, I believe Sarah Spain was working for Mouthpiece Sports.
Oh, my gosh. Deep cut.
Yes.
Yes.
Now rising to the top of media, ESPN. And your new show is?
iHeart. Good Game with Sarah Spain, the only daily women's sports show of any kind on any medium.
If somebody had told you when you were standing outside the Cubs clubhouse in whatever that year was that this would be you today, what would you have said?
I don't know that I would have believed it. That was a rough ride starting out. I was not super there were some very nice people, and then there were some other very not nice people. So it's nice to emerge unscathed for the most part.
Well, let me just tell you,
I feel
Greg,
like that's the fourth person this week that's been like, yeah, this media business, there's some people that aren't that great.
Yeah.
It sucks, but we love it, and we're never leaving, and please don't ever kick us out.
Yeah, exactly. At least not of our own accord.
Right. I just want to let you know, because you're a very aggressive guy, and you just brought Sarah over here, but Bulldog at the start. I was like, I don't know who that person is who just showed up here, but she's going somewhere. It was you had the hunger.
Where do you think I followed the lead, right?
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I mean, once upon a time, we took a picture at before the NFC Championship game for the Bears in a tailgate lot near McCormick lot.
Well, that's the thing. I was a Bulldog, but also like a genuine fan who wanted to keep that. And like everyone was like, oh, in this business, you're going to lose it and you're not going to care anymore. And I was like, I'm determined not to become that like hardened to the thing that brought me here. So like, I remember being on the radio at the beginning and the guys, over at ESPN 1000 would be like, oh, tailgating's not the same. And I literally would go in and turn on my like, when was the last time you tailgated?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess it was. And I'm like, yeah, don't talk smack. Actually show up. Like, we have a good time still. You got to get out there. So I try to still do that as much as I can so that I'm not that detached.
Not to make it about us, but that's kind of the cool thing that our company does here. It's like we're trying to, we're threading the needle. And it's hard to do sometimes, but
we do tailgates, so you can come by anytime. We're at the corner of Wabash and Cermak.
You're not professional. You're not journalist. Quit being a fan. Why did you ask Trey Smith? I'll stop talking. Bring that up. Where'd you get that coat? That thing is sweet.
I got this at a thrift shop in Wicker Park, I want to say, and someone probably died in this, and that's fine with me. It is a legit from the Super Bowl championship year. There's a couple little rips and tears, but it was like $40, so I feel like it had to have arrived that day. Like I might have been the first person who saw it on the rack because I don't think this lasts long.
No, that doesn't. That's
legit
awesome.
Vintage.
I mean, just going back to your story too, like I'm just fascinated too because you make the climb not just in the media but like sports ownership too.
Yeah.
So like I'm just curious like how you kind of found that vision and your journey through that.
Yeah, the Chicago Red Stars was ultimately like a great lesson, even though the actual experience didn't go the way I'd hoped. For those who don't know, our majority owner basically got forced to sell the team because of drag rights. All the minority owners didn't have enough of a percentage to keep their parts. We had to go with him in the sale to Laura Ricketts and the other ownership. And it sucked. I mean, to find out that he was complicit and knew some of the toxic and abusive behavior that was going on at the team and that we weren't told about that probably could be a lawsuit, but I don't have the kind of money or time to invest in fighting someone who has more money than me and then trying to figure out if we would win. But we should have been informed about a lot of investigations and stuff that happened with the team before we got there. I chalk it up because I'm a positive person to like the equivalent of going to business school, right? I put money somewhere. I made a lot of connections. I learned a lot of the business side, and I entered on the other side, kind of pissed about how things went, but meeting a ton of people. I'm now working with ALLCITY Impact Fund, which is the NWSL team in LA has a community involvement. And so that gets me into another space full of the people that I want to be around, putting my money behind women's sports and initiatives, and trying again, hopefully somewhere that won't be as toxic. But I'll tell you what, like you spend your whole career taking on the man and then you become it, and you do have a better perspective on how you spend money, where it goes, how hard it is to turn things around quick. Like all the complaints we have with all the teams that we cover, I do have a little more sensitivity to how tough it is. And in other ways, I'm like, the people aren't getting it done. Right. And we should keep holding their feet to the fire if they don't.
Yeah. So on that note, what do you think about what the Bears did here to finally, they've spent more money on a coach they ever have. They went and got the guy that everybody wanted.
Right. They didn't pull the old whoop-de-doo and where we're suddenly like, who's from the CFL? Like, I'm very hopeful, but I keep saying this. The choice is either stop watching football or stop rooting for the Bears or be hopeful. the idea of just showing up every year cynical and angry is not fun for me. So every time they revamp, I'm like, this time this is gonna be the fix. I love Ben Johnson. I love his staff that he's putting together. I really honed in on a lot of the positives from Caleb that I saw, and I think it's fascinating how people are willing to get into storylines around distractions when it's something like a famous significant other, like, oh, Taylor Swift is a distraction, or when it's like nobody could ever come out as gay, it'd be too much of a distraction. But when someone has multiple head coaches, multiple pass callers, multiple people are like, you should be able to work through that. Like, that's literally the distraction that we should be talking about. When we talk about, his first year, I'm much more impressed with everything, whether it's the way he handled himself with the media to how he played, than I am worried about some of the stuff that I think showed up, because I think you can't separate that from the coaching staff and the ineptitude that was quite clear at every turn. There's just too much talent on this team for them to play the way they did. It had to be coaching.
So I want to rewind back just for a second here. Your moral compass, where does that come from? Like I go, like, for myself. I know this is not a question, but I'm thinking about my amazing mom, the great Gladys Carmen, R.I.P., who used to cut hair in the basement of my house.
Amazing.
And so I'm 8 years old, and she brings this guy up. Hey, Mark, I want you to meet Mr. Smith. Hey, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith's a bigot, like, right in front of me. And I had like learning terms like that. Like, I'm not taking your money. You're never coming back. You said something that wasn't okay. And my dad gets credit too. So I carry stuff like that with me.
Yeah.
And you're out there in the fighting the battle. So I'm curious where it comes from for you.
I think it's probably most of my parents. They're both lawyers. They both are just like really dedicated to work that matters. They work a lot with people with disabilities. They help pass laws in Illinois for wills and estates and trusts that get handed down to people with disabilities so that the state doesn't take them and things like that. And they're just like good, moral-centered people. And then I think also if you're part of like a traditionally marginalized group and you are used to things being unfair for you, when I see things that are unfair for other people, it chaps my ass. Mm-hmm. So like, as opposed to like, let me get what's good for me and then be okay with other people not getting what's right, I would never do that. And I think it's frustrating when I see people in marginalized groups that aren't as actively trying to make sure things are right for everyone.
Yeah.
It's got to be my parents. It's got to be my parents.
That's usually where it starts.
It's normal.
And honestly, I think yesterday was National Women's Broadcasting
Girls
Day.
and Women in Sports Day.
That's right. And
which is why we love.
That's right. And I was about to say, it's 100% the case at ALLCITY. I was a bricklayer for 20 years, and I say this, and it's not a joke. These girls that work at this, these
and
women.
Yeah, there we
go. Yeah,
you got it. You got there.
No, I was raised.
Proud of you.
I was raised by women, so I lived with all women my entire life. So I totally get it. But it is the truth. Hardest working people I've ever been around, and that includes any bricklayer that I've ever been with on a wall any day of the week. Like,
we have to work harder. Like, I tell people sometimes, like, they kind of. It's interesting. Dan Le Batard often kind of like psychoanalyzes his friends and guest hosts and those people. And they just did this oral history of the show, and he said, like, I know why Sarah Spain came in hot, and I know why she came in dominant and like ready to take over the show, as opposed to other people who kind of sit back. He's like, at every turn, she's got to be better than everybody. And especially when I started going on that show, I was still doing updates at 1000. I had a national show on the weekends, and they wouldn't let me fill in. If one of the hosts got sick at ESPN 1000, they would literally pay for someone to come and like be freaking out. And I'm sitting right there already in the studio, and I have a national show on the weekends, and it didn't even occur to them. So Le Batard was watching and being like, how is this woman who's so talented not being used for anything? And so for me, that was part of why, like, sometimes too much so, too like over the top or too getting after it, because I'm trying to prove something, because I'm so used to constantly, like I was alluding to earlier, when I got to Chicago and I went in the locker rooms, like, a lot of the older media people were absolute trash to me. They went to the PR staffs. They said she must be sleeping with the players. They're giving her better answers. They didn't even know my name yet. I just got there, but their assumptions were entirely, she doesn't know her stuff. She must be here to screw everybody. And like, when you have that constantly always being assumed, you almost like have to try too hard for people to know that you know your stuff. And it's kind of annoying at times, and it like hamstrings you. You can't just lay back and have fun.
I get it. At least I get specifically the part of, I'm right here. Put me
Hello.
Yeah.
Put me on the air. I promise I won't mess it up.
Yeah.
I think all of us can at least relate to that part of the
I
equation.
tried to stop figuring out radio decisions
Agreed.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
But be nice to girls and women in sports because, and especially, my new show, Good Game with Sarah Spain, is entirely women's sports show. And a lot of people who aren't in that world are like, how do you even have to talk about it? And I'm like, we have too much. Like, we're trying to aim for about 30 to 40 minutes a day, and we go long because it's blowing up from, like, Unrivaled to WNBA, NWSL, the national teams. I just had Callie Bronson who's with the Browns for the last 5 years. She just left to run all of USA football to get ready for all the flag football Olympic teams.
That's going to be awesome.
There's just so much going on, and if you're not aware of it, I can see how you might not get it. If you're in the world, you realize that the money, the investments, the big names, everyone's going to women's sports.
Well, I'm addicted to women's college volleyball.
Dude,
it's the NCAA tournament is insane.
Yeah,
like it's
such a
like
good watch.
Edge. Like as soon as those games, the only thing honestly, it's gonna sound weird. I know people probably haven't watched it. It reminds me of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah,
where you're just on the edge of your seat the entire time.
Yeah, there's no dead space.
No, it just keeps
and
going.
women's college basketball, hands down, a million times more interesting than men's. Because it's not one and done. It's like we can look at someone like Juju Watkins who goes off in her rookie season. She's only a sophomore now because of the rules. Unless the new WNBA CBA changes it, there's an age limit and a years limit, so they can't leave early, which means you get multiple years of watching Caitlin versus Angel or Juju Watkins and Paige Beckers and all these stars.
Plus, and that's not taking anything away from if we're going back in time like the Cheryl Millers or whoever, but the level of skill now is so insane. Because
it's a great watch.
Everybody goes at the youth of America. These people are like they have their own personal coach at 8. It's
right.
It's
and
wild.
You know what? It's follow the money.
Yeah.
Right? When there became money in the women's college game, that meant more coaches want to go. That meant more AAU people wanted to get their stars going. With NIL now, you've got multimillionaires at the collegiate level in women's basketball. You know, when you get that, you're going to get more investment, more resources, more gyms, more coaches, like all the stuff that the boys have always had.
And that's where I started. I started covering girls high school basketball and watching that culture and watching how loyal the fans that actually were invested in it. And that was 6-7 years ago. And to see how much it's grown, the basketball end of it from not just college now to the WNBA. Obviously, Caitlin Clark really put this thing in like rocket fuel to another level. Like, it's fascinating, right, to see how now the business end of it, because the sponsors are running to it like it's a gold mine, but then the WNBA trying to figure out how to make it work, you know, because it almost like just is flooding it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really exciting. It's like I would say Caitlin Clark was like a spark on top of a bonfire. You had to build the bonfire first. Right. All the wood had to be there, the years of time and energy and effort and all the great players. But then she had a specific thing, which to me is easy to sum up. You don't need to know anything about her, the team, the defense, the opponent. She's shooting from half court. That's hard to do. And that cracked the door ajar. And then enough people heard about it, and then they started watching and they liked it.
And from a Chicago perspective, too, because I know I can already hear it in my head from Chicago fans, like Angel Reese as well. She holds a huge end of this bargain.
But Angel Reese is a different kind of player.
Right, 100%.
Like she's more like, you could be critical of whether she, relies on Pat statting for her double-doubles. Or you can make an argument about whether she's quick enough outside of the paint. But with Caitlin, you don't have to know anything, and you don't have to do the same dumb comparisons about they're not fast enough or they don't dunk. It's kind of like Steph. Like, those arguments about the kind of basketball we like to watch changed with that Warriors team, and the way that they changed how we saw the Splash Brothers as the most exciting thing instead of that inside play and that dominant center is the same way that Caitlin was able to show people, like, it doesn't have to be as fast and as high in the air. It can be a game that you're watching because this girl can chuck it from anywhere.
You need that yin and yang, right? Like Bird versus Magic.
Yes, you needed the rivalry.
Jordan
so Angel
versus
helped a lot.
Everybody.
And also, a lot of people don't get that while Caitlin Clark is massive, Angel Reese has like 8 million followers on social. She's on the Met Gala co-chair committee. She has the first ever female McDonald's sponsorship. Like,
I was gonna say, she's sponsoring literally everything.
As a brand and as a person that, lots of like SZA and all these artists are also fans of her and coming and watching her and showing up courtside. Like, she has an appeal that maybe the average middle of Iowa American isn't into, but a whole lot of the country is.
Yeah. Sarah, we'll see you at the Super Bowl next year when the Bears are here.
1,000%. I posted a photo of a Roman DJ yesterday. I was like, next year's champs.
That's right.
Telling it now.
Exactly right. Right, the great Sarah Spain.
Thanks, guys.
We all silly like the mayor.